Quest Software has solutions that allow you to add an additional layer of security to your Microsoft environment. To learn how they can help you protect and detect changes in your environment, please go to quest.com/MPM. Make sure your team is prepared to fight off the latest cybersecurity threat. IT Pro TV is the resource to keep you and your IT team skills up to date. You can stream IT Pro TV's courses live and on demand worldwide, so there's no need to send staff to off-site training. Their team solution provides access to a supervisor portal for full control over your team's training schedule and group analytics. Visit itpro.tv/enterprise security and use the code ES30 to try it free for 7 days and receive 30% off your monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription. To learn more about IT Pro TV's team solution, sign up for a free demo of their supervisor portal. Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, Pwn Phone, and Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security. I almost said Startup Security Weekly because you were here. This is Enterprise Security Weekly. I want to remind everyone to check out our Stealth Bits webcast happening tomorrow with our good friend Jonathan Sander, Dr. Doug White, and myself. Like I said, I'm just going to sit back. We're going to hear Dr. Doug White talk about file system analysis and Jonathan talk about the automation of file system analysis.
This is going to be fun.
You can't get an any better combination.
And I'm going to have a great seat. I'm going to literally just look over your shoulder.
You should sit in with it.
It's going to
be fun. Yeah, be fun. So that's happening tomorrow. securityweekly.com/stealth bits for that. I don't know if I have any more announcements. That's it. All righty. We got a ton of stories to talk about, which
it's busy.
I feel like we didn't really review that much because it's been kind of a hectic day.
We're going to learn as we go through.
We'll learn as we go. It's good. It's good. I tell you what, one I'm excited about is Flexera is offering an open source free solution offers free open source security subscriptions. And I'm assuming it's to analyze your open source install shield, the industry standard for development teams creating Windows Desktop Server and Cloud installers, more than 500. Also, they've open sourced Install Shield. That's interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Have you ever, back in the day?
Back in the day, yeah, I was going to say, you just brought me back. I feel young again, except for I don't.
It's 30th anniversary, that would explain, because we're old and we remember, wow, 30 years. Because subscribe to FlexNet CodeAware, Flexera's leading automated open source risk assessment package. Also, it is a subscription at no charge to FlexNet CodeAware, their automated open source risk assessment tool, which basically I would use for my internal applications. It would analyze all the open source software I had and tell me if I had any vulnerabilities in it. This is a no-brainer. Now there's a free version of it.
Yeah, you know what I like too? The phrase that caught my attention was looking at the software supply chain. You know, we've as an industry, we're pretty good with digital or with physical supply chain.
Right.
And what we're hearing more and more in the last couple of years is this whole digital supply chain. So a lot of times we're looking at our third parties, right? And so some of the folks we've talked to in startup look at that. This is looking at those code libraries that you're using, which are on the rise. And so this makes a lot of sense.
It does. I feel like every enterprises should just have this, right? I mean, because chances are you've got some open source components if you're developing your own software.
So is this is good for everybody and it's good for the enterprise, and so that's why they're doing it because it's giving back, or does this feel like it's good marketing because we're talking about it, other people talk about it?
Well, it's marketing, and I think it's to let people try it, like give people a taste. Yeah, because I mean, think about it. If you're a large enterprise and you've got
cheap, hook 'em deep.
Yeah, 200-300 applications. Think about how many Git commits that is in a day. Basically, when you make a commit, this software can kick off, which is how I understand that it works, and scans that repository and says, "Oh, your code now includes this open source library, and I know it's vulnerable because I have all those signatures." It's like an extension of vulnerability management.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of their stats in this. I always like this. 63% say their companies don't have an open source acquisition or usage policy, or they don't know if one exists.
Yeah, because if they don't know if their developers are using it, because the developer, it's free, the developer just went and got it and is using it, and it works. You're not thinking about, well, now that's embedded in my app, and what happens if that software is vulnerable?
That's a blind spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the enterprise has no idea how to even scan for that until companies, well, Black Duck, I believe, was one. And they got acquired, right?
Successful, very successful.
And then in Flexera, Flexera public?
Well, so this is interesting
player.
too. So here, just to take a look at it again, so this is, I think, this is both a marketing and a give back. Help celebrate 30th anniversary. If you're current on your Install Shield maintenance, now for no charge, you get the Flex Code Aware.
Oh, interesting. That's
a pretty smart way to do it.
Yep.
I kind of like that. Well, that's cool. Well, listen, if you're using it, let us know how you like it. I noticed something kind of interesting, Paul, in some of these things here. So you've got the cloud distribution, right? So cloud distribution brings deception tech to local market with the TrapX deal. But then we've also got, where is it? In the show notes, Shape Security. So are we seeing more of this now pop up in the enterprise? Are we getting to the point where we're going to use deception and deception technologies? Or are we just getting excited about it?
No, I think my assessment is deception is being built into your overall strategy. I think before we had honeypots, right?
Yep.
And that was kind of cute. But now the honeypots, I mean, they're essentially still they're components of a honeypot. So it's not a separate system. And there's open source solutions that actually, I was just researching for my talk that I'm giving next week at Pentest Hackfest from SANS. And there's open source information out there, basically how you can create elements inside of, let's say in this case, Active Directory, such that if attackers manage to execute code on one of your systems and then start accessing resources internally, that they're accessing these fake resources.
Right.
But now there's this whole cat and mouse thing that goes back and forth. Right? Javelin's been on the show as a sponsor, talking about this a lot. They released Honeybuster, which basically allows you to, as an attacker, detect if those honey tokens, they list out 7 different ways to basically kind of do it for free. The Honeybuster will detect if those things are in use because of the way that they're created.
So the trick here is we want to create more friction for an attacker, right? We want to make it harder for them.
It's more about increasing the detection ratio. Like if they bypass defenses, they access something. In the past, it was like, oh, they access the honeypot. But now there's stuff inside your environment that they call deception that's listening for certain things.
So it's deception, but it's not necessarily, because we've looked at some stuff where it's I'm always changing, right? It's always different. So as an attacker, you can't figure it out. I'm just trying to piss you off. But in this case, what we're saying, or in some of these cases, it's not just the honeypot. Because do you remember, we've been doing this long enough, we would tell people you can put a honeypot out there, but please don't try to get fancy. So if you detect something, shut them down. Don't try to play with them. Don't.
Right.
But what we're saying now is, look, there's so many people that are probably getting in, or somebody might get in. So let's give you a lot of different places to take a look at it. So it's the deception is not that I'm changing everything so frequently that you can't figure it out. It's that I've given you enough false flags. You're going to go for something.
It's setting a trap.
And I'm going to figure it out.
It's basically setting a trap, I think, is the most simplistic way of thinking of, now that I think about it and converse with you about this subject, which I only really talked about deception stuff all that much this year.
We haven't. And I'll tell you what's interesting. I'm looking at this one, the article from Shape on it. We must have covered them in startup, and I apologize because I don't remember it that well. But they've raised $106 million in venture funding today. So, depending
it's a very well-funded area, yes.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what that valuation's at, that's putting them closer to that unicorn-style status. And for a company like that, we haven't heard a lot from Shape. But here's what I also thought was interesting. We talk all the time about the importance of identity, and we'll talk about it again. So they launched what they call Blackfish Artificial Intelligence to detect credential stuffing. So, we always in the news is all of these breaches that have stolen all the credentials. And what they're saying is credential stuffing is somebody who says, oh, well, these are breached. Let me go see what I can get. And they're now looking at ways to be able to grab that, which I think is interesting because that's not what I would have expected from Shape. So do you think that that's them looking at, okay, my customers have this problem and we have a way to solve it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think that's smart?
Well, I think, the technology has to be implemented very carefully. My concern always is a legitimate user stumbles over this. A legitimate user, maybe in your case, logs into an account or whatever, and maybe it was stolen, maybe it wasn't, but they logged in. And you're saying the stuffing aspect of it, right? Like I know this user's been breached. Maybe I've disabled that account, but maybe that has impacts to the user. So you have to be careful with these various techniques in impacting the end user. You don't want your own users falling into those traps, is always my concern. The problem with the honeypot is they might think that that's a legitimate resource on the network, but now you've got all these little smaller resources sprinkled throughout.
You know what's funny? I think people are going to assume that we really prepared for this. They actually address this in the article, and they're using a Bloom filter, which is a computer science methodology used in search functions to help determine if a specific data element is part of a data set. So their point is, I can now use this approach to give you the benefit of a common database of compromised credentials without having to have an actual database of compromised credentials because they don't want to create a new liability. That's kind of interesting because in where I'm drawing this, I'm drawing the connections, and I just realized that I made the leap in my head and didn't make it out loud. One of the things that I've always been fascinated with these types of technologies is we give people the ability to say, if your users are legit, you can almost validate them.
Right.
Like, and that's important. Like when we look at the enterprise, I just did a workshop this week, and one of the things we talked about is a lot of times in security, we're still quick to say, well, if you're doing something wrong, I'm going to stop you. There's a lot of these new technologies we can say, if somebody else were to compromise your account, wouldn't it be great if we could detect that and you don't get blamed for it? Oh, people like that.
I've run into that situation, yeah.
Well, and so think about that difference. Think about that from an enterprise perspective. If you get that ability to say to somebody, we're going to put in a technology, it's not designed to block you. Our technology is designed that if somebody were to compromise your account, yeah, I know you're pissed about Equifax. Don't worry. We've got stuff here. We're taking a look at it. That's a different play for security than we tend to see, and I think that's the future. A lot of what we look at in the enterprise today is the phrasing that I'm getting a lot, and I think you and I talked about it last week on Startup is that influence without authority. And by the way, you can say, "Oh, we have authority. It came from the CEO. The board said we got to do it." Yeah, that doesn't create authority. That just creates a nuisance for people. That influence is that ability. It's that distinction. If you're in enterprise security, that's the distinction between saying, "Do this because I'm in security and you have to," and I've listened to you. This is a concern. I totally get it. Well, here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to block you, but what we're going to do is make sure that all this other bad stuff that's going on, well, if any of that comes to our doorstep, we're going to look for it, and that's going to protect you. Total different way of thinking about it. So I think it's interesting because we're looking at these deception technologies, Paul. We're looking at people that are trying to create more friction for the attackers, and the trend I'm noticing is that we keep coming back to identity. That it keeps popping up.
Are you familiar with Microsoft Lapse?
Only because I read the article on it. But I'm deeply familiar with passwords.
Yeah, well, and the local admin account password, right? In that it has to be unique across all of those systems. Microsoft created a free tool or system, a tool with integration components. It's about a 47-page document from Microsoft to just get started in learning how to.
It's a short one.
It's a short, quick read. Now, when I've presented this topic, again, it's interesting how it goes back to my talk I'm giving next week, which I've only given one other time earlier this year in Boston. There's maybe 50 people in the room. There was like one, maybe two people that are like, oh, no, like lapses, that's not a big deal at all. It's not that bad. It's fine. That was one out of 50, right? And that's one of the themes that has emerged.
So they have one server, really simple.
Yeah, probably, right. Their environment could be smaller. But that's one of the themes that emerge is that organizations really struggle with securing Active Directory. Lapse is one of those complicated things. It's something that you have to do if you want to claim any increase in security in your Active Directory system, which is constantly under attack. However, it remains difficult. What Lieberman, I think, is saying here is, in a survey they're pointing out that people have issues with Lapse. It only works on domain-connected computers, and people admit they use it because it's free, not because it's the best solution.
Right.
And there's other issues there, in addition to the ones I've highlighted in implementation, which is not the most straightforward or easy thing for the majority of people. Let
me point this thing out, because you said something I think is interesting, and I'm going to look at it from two different directions, right? One is, look, Microsoft is one of those love-hates, right? I mean, I got to tell you, I think a lot of the stuff that they're doing from a consumer and a business productivity perspective is phenomenal. Like it's it's really impressive. But I also know, because I've been doing this for 20 years, there's times you look at Microsoft and you go, that's awesome. And there's other times you look at it and you go, well, that's kind of tough. But here's the thing. Microsoft comes to you and says, look, we know this is a concern. It's a 47-page document, which is short by some standards. And here's a free tool to help you out. So people are going to go ahead and adopt it. This is the paragraph that stood out to me. Also from the survey, 61% of respondents who have used the Microsoft Labs are unaware of its security flaws. And I go, okay. But that's an interesting point. Here's the flaw, Paul. It stores passwords in clear text.
I did not know that, to be honest with you.
Like, yeah.
I didn't think that was that's interesting.
I look at that and I go, wait a minute. You put out a tool and you're storing the password in clear text? Oh. No, we can't do that. But that's an interesting question. So if somebody comes to you and they say, hey, this is a problem, here's a tool to fix it, do you then say, wait, I need to go check out that problem? I need to understand it better, and is this the right tool for it? I think with the current pace that we're all operating at, you go, Microsoft says I need to do it. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. And they got a tool for it and it integrates? Boom, let's do it.
But it's interesting, even though it stores it in clear text, it still solves part of the problem, or the problem that every workstation has the same local administrator password. Now every machine has a different password, but it's stored in clear text.
Yeah, and this is the part that I still get excited about with security. So what's the bigger risk?
Right. Exactly.
So we can sit there and go, I can't believe Microsoft did that. On the flip side, there might be a valid reason for it. I can't think of it, but there might be.
And like, where on the laundry list does this fall for all these poor Active Directory administrators and security people listening to the show that are in the enterprise that have an Active Directory security problem, which is all of us, essentially. And there's a great article. So one of the articles I was reading was from Sean Metcalf.
Yep.
He runs Active Security, adsecurity.org. And he actually has an article, which I linked to in my talk, where he's like, look, here are your main points you need to be concerned with Active Directory security. Largely, I agree. His list is more extensive, and a little more detailed.
Here's the main points. How long you got?
Then my list that I present in my talk is 5 things. I pick on 5 things.
I like that.
I go into different.
Of course, no, I like that.
Sean's it takes a slightly different approach than mine. Mine's a little more tactical and talks about some of the specific hashing things that need to happen. His, I think, is a little more strategic, and obviously he is way more of a subject matter expert in Active Directory security. Right. He runs the site adsecurity.org, and is responsible for publishing a lot of information about Active Directory security. And we've interviewed, I believe we've interviewed Sean on the show. I'm pretty sure he was on Paul Security Weekly. So
sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, I mean, back to the enterprise thing. What essentially, if you're out there and you have this problem, Lieberman is saying they can help you with this problem in a big way. If you use their identity management, of course, which is the whole point of their survey, you can run. You must have to run their agent, I would imagine, although maybe not. I'm not 100% sure. But they're saying their identity management works on Windows, Unix, Linux, and Mac, and encrypts the stored passwords, has no dependency on Active Directory, and includes an interface to manage all of that. That's why you would adopt and pay money to Lieberman to help solve that problem for you. And there's others in the space.
And I think it's a fair point, right? And that's the advantage of watching a program like this is when we talk about these things, you say, wait, well, I haven't thought about that. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the point, right? And I hope what we've offered is, in the list of 99 things, 2,000 things, whatever, it's one of the things I find is that if you're in security, we're prone to viewing everything as a risk. Mm-hmm. And because we understand it so deeply, everything is a big risk. Not everything is a big risk.
No. And so what's interesting, I've distilled it down to 5 things that's based on my research from interviewing all of our pen tester friends.
That's really smart.
And how they break into organizations.
What's the number one?
Old password hashes, LM and NTL, right?
This is exactly what this is addressing.
This is the other problem, is the administrator issue. And then there's the Mimikatz in-memory passwords you should disable. So I basically distilled it down to 5 things. And I'm like, look, I interviewed, and I still talk with all my pen tester friends and ask them, I don't ask them how you get in. I ask them, look, how do you take complete control of an organization and gain access to all of the resources? Because if I ask them like what's their success rate is, they're like 100%.
100%,
Like,
yeah.
it's all. I'm like, so how do you get in? They're like, I'm an awesome, skilled, super ninja. I'm like, okay, well, tell me how you like
did you develop
get
these
the good
skills?
stuff, right? And then I basically distilled it down to, in the Active Directory world, these 5 things. And this is one of these 5 things, and I thought it was interesting. It came up, a couple of elements of this came up in our news this week, which is cool.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, and one of the things I preach about Lieberman and anybody doing it, a survey, even if it's not scientifically proven, anytime you can give me data, you can give me something to look at.
Yeah.
I've got something to go, and it always works in 2 ways. Compare yourself to it. So did you know how it worked? Did you consider any of these things? Is anything you paid attention to? Where do you fall on it? And then if you want to go make the case, bring the data. Sure. I mean, of course it benefits Lieberman, but I always appreciate somebody who's doing that sort of data, because there's a big difference between going and saying, this is a problem, I need money for it, and this is a problem. This is the limitation with the Microsoft solution. This is why it's a problem. And this is how many people are dealing with it. And this is what I want to do. Because if you think about it in the enterprise, if you're going to go make the case as a security person that you need something else, and by the way, don't ever shy away from that. I talk to too many security people who say, well, I didn't have budget, so I waited. If you think this is a concern, bring it. You know why somebody who has better control of the budget gets paid probably more than you? Because they have to make those decisions. Don't feel bad about what they're going to think about you. That's their job to make that decision. But if you can go to them and say, look, X% of companies are doing this, X% of problems are this, right? If you can give them data points and evidence and then say, so this is what I'd like to do and this is why, you've made a much stronger case. And so I always love stories like that, because I think there's a lot of value in those stories, and I get excited about those types of things.
Where do you want to go next?
I was looking at this force point.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a bit. Our friend Matt loves them. Matt Alderman, he likes their approach. By the way, Matt, if I've got you wrong, I apologize. But
I think it's strategic, and I think what Matt's point is the way they've pieced things together, acquisitions, and the whole thing.
He thinks they're quality, and they take a human-centric approach. And so, naturally, if you've paid attention to me, I like people. I think if we put people at the center and we make it easier for people to do their jobs, we're in a really good place. So what they're looking at now is the hybrid clouds. What's your think on this? I mean, is this a good idea? I mean, look, this is a thing from them. So they're the only security company that's doing it, blah, 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 blah. Cool. But hybrid cloud. So as we look at cloud adoption in the enterprise today, what are we looking at? What do we need to think about? And where do you see the hybrid cloud coming into it?
I think it's one take that I have on this, and this segues into my other research into Docker, and I know a lot of people roll their eyes and have hatred, but just I'm telling you.
So it's not pants. You're not talking about pants.
I'm not talking about pants. But when you look at going beyond just virtualization and moving into containers, what I've noticed is a trend towards, well, I don't really need to store them on the cloud now. Like, I can have some of these assets locally if it's only a local application. I may push some up to the cloud, and containers give you more of that flexibility. Whereas with virtual systems, you were in virtual machines, you were like, well, it's more cost effective for me to host that whole thing out on the cloud than it is for me to host it here. But now we're talking about segmenting applications apart into different components and deploying them easily. I'm seeing more, my point is more of a hybrid approach.
Okay.
Right? More of, I have containers here and I have some containers in the cloud. Whereas with virtual machines and virtual systems, it was much more finite, right? Like, I had my cloud resources, I have my local resources. I may shift a lot more into the cloud than I have locally, but now containers are kind of so light and easily deployable that I'm having more of a mixed approach. How I secure that, I think, is the continuing theme we're going to see for the next couple of years.
I'm going to tell you, based on what I'm reading here, I've got to go take a closer look at Force Point. Here's something I really like. I'm just going to excerpt part of it. They identified a guy named Frank, but they said they helped Frank and his team cut through the feeds of false positives, quickly identify, drill down into incidents that require immediate remediation. Anytime you're a solution that is speeding my time to resolution, if you're helping me understand, go take action on this, ignore this, that's huge. That's a big deal. But this other part that I really liked is they talked about the fact, and again, they're setting up their construct, and I don't feel like we need to give that credit. But what they said is, we're helping both the customers and the employees. Oh, I think that's cool. I think that's a really interesting thing. So that's interesting. I'll pay more attention then too. So I need to get spun up on microservice. Is Docker part of microservices or is
microservices? Yes.
Yeah.
Containers would be a micro. Well, the application it provides would be a microservice.
I've got so much to learn. Let's talk about open APIs. Threat Quotient, Open Exchange API.
Now, is this a free thing from Threat Quotient?
You need a valid access token to follow along.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
So maybe that I just have to register with them. A lot of these open threat feeds just require that I register and I can gain access to a cool little feed that I do one that gives a complete, I talked about it on the show before, like a complete vulnerability breakdown. And so you can query it and give it a CVE ID or any kind of vulnerability identifier, and it gives you all of the information about that vulnerability. Which is pretty cool. It tells you if it's a Metasploit module or some other exploit or some other thing. That's pretty cool. So a lot of these, I'm assuming when it says Open Exchange API, that it is in fact free.
There's a lot of really good detail in this, Paul.
Yeah, this is more of like a tech segment that we'd run on Paul Security Weekly.
Yep. The thing that I always like about it is that anytime you're providing APIs like this, anytime, right? So one of the things we talked about even with our interview is if you're giving me the ability to enhance what I've got, if you're giving me the ability to look at something, if you're connecting with something, if you're giving me better insights, I'm a big fan of it. I more on the startup side, but when we talk about value proposition, the third part we talk about is impact. If your technology is creating a new category for me, it's one more pain to manage, it's one more whatever, that's tough. If you're giving me APIs and you're showing me how I can connect with other stuff and I can get things done, I'm much happier about that.
And that's really where I think threat intelligence is one of its useful features is if I can be inside of my software I'm using for incident response, I can take data that was collected from my network, I can compare it with what's coming in or out of the or coming out of the API from Threat Quotient, and then I can use it as a further qualifier. That's pretty cool. That's how I usually recommend that people use it, because people tend to want to use it the other way. They want to take down the entire threat feed, and then they want to go see if their other sources of information have elements of the threat feed.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm like, no, it's the other way. Learn what's happening in your environment and use a threat feed to maybe further qualify.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the thing that's interesting is if you go talk to people that are, I've had the advantage in my life of speaking to a lot of really cool people. When you go talk to folks that have done, I'm going to abstract out for a second. So they'll call themselves door kickers, special forces that then works with intelligence. They've always said context and timing are what matter most. Intelligence about stuff that doesn't matter to me, I don't care.
Yeah.
I need to know it's on target. Like it's context and it's relevant and it's timely. So anytime that you can say threat intelligence, what I always want to say is, but what's the context and how relevant is that, right? So that's the relevance, and how timely is it to me, and can I then act on it? So anytime that you can show me that this is connecting to what I have,
right,
and it matters to me, and it's in a fashion where I can do something with it, oh, that's exciting. So, because I know a lot of people, they've kind of shit on threat intelligence as a...
Yeah, John does. Mostly because people use it incorrectly.
I get it. I've rejected a lot of those calls for that same thing. So what's interesting, so Gemalto's in our news, IBM's in our news, and they're looking at account fraud. Identity, folks, identity. I'm curious, Paul, at some level, and I like feedback. I'm happy to get it. What are you guys doing for identity today? Like, which of these things are you looking at? Are you worried about fraud? Are you worried about protecting the users? Are you worried about these stuffing attacks? Are you worried? Like, what do you think people are worried about today? So IBM's got a new fraud detection tool that they've got out there. I got to tell you what I think is interesting. If I look at it from a payments perspective, we don't have a fraud problem. Not in the U.S. If you're watching us and you're not in the U.S., I accept that the U.S. approach to fraud is different from a payment card process. But I think it's kind of interesting to look at the way that people are handling this in terms of new account fraud and the way that people are handling this in different ways. I think largely in the payment card, the banking industry, when I look at the numbers, it's not a big deal.
Well, I think it's an easier problem to deal with than some of the security problems that we talk about. Well, pretty much all the security problems we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
Fraud's a very finite thing and involves a very finite transaction that can be more easily measured. And while there are threat actors, they still have to fit within this neat little system of how a payment works. Whereas a computer and a network of computers in a cloud and all that stuff can take on so many shapes and
and
forms.
the nice thing about fraud, if we're fair about it, right? And typically we're looking at financial fraud.
Yes.
It's actual dollars for actual people.
Yeah.
I can solve for that.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
Paul, you realize we live in an age where major banks have commercials about how if they detect something fraudulent, they will text you, or they will notify you in the app, or they will. That's a security feature. So if you're watching and you go, oh, security is never going to be a differentiator. Yeah, watch the commercials, watch football, and you'll see that security is actually now a differentiator. I'll tell you what, though, this is something interesting in this particular article. It talks about that a lot of times that what happens is they set up these fraudulent accounts and they lie dormant for a while.
Yeah.
So essentially when they set up the account, they wait, and then when they think the coast is clear, then they go after it. And that makes some of that detection hard.
It must trip an alarm if a new account is created, and then there's a lot of spending that happens after that.
Yeah. And what we're finding is, right, so classically, if we looked at fraudulent accounts, they'd create the account, and then they'd go dip it at a gas station. They'd do a really low-value transaction. And we're starting to find now that they'll create the accounts, and they'll normalize them a lot faster.
I gotcha.
And then they'll wait. And so what they're saying then is that IBM has said, well, we've got a way to do it. But what they're claiming is that you can detect some at open, but you've got to look at it later, and we can do that. We can take a look at the factors that happen after. And I will tell you, when I look at the enterprise stuff, I'm seeing a lot of solutions now, Paul, that I felt like we were promised in the 90s that we just couldn't deliver on. They were maybe were better than what we had. I think if I look at it in a positive light, it was better than what we had, but they couldn't deliver what they promised. The number of factors we have now, the speed with which we can do the detection, the number of things we can analyze, the data that we can store and process, I think it's interesting. I think
I'm surprised they didn't mention Watson in here either.
They've been doing that a lot lately.
Yeah, usually Watson shows up in every announcement from IBM.
Paul, you've got some experience looking at this. So WatchGuard's new tabletop UTM, speed and security for small and distributed offices. We talked about WatchGuard last week on Startup because they're refiling for their IPO. They're filing for a new IPO. They're around, and they're working at, and you and I talked about that there's the SMB, there's the enterprise, there's the mid-market, and there's maybe some other tier in there, the small enterprise. What do you think of something like this then? Because you've got experience looking at UTM, you've got this idea of distributed offices and stuff. Is this a good play? I mean, is this, if you're a smaller office, if you're somebody in an enterprise today, but you've got those remote and distributed offices, do you just want to put one appliance in? Do you just want one device and it kind of takes care of most of everything? Is that the easier way to do it?
I mean, potentially. The problem with UTM historically is that it does a lot of things, but none of them really well. But when you're faced with a small office where there's no dedicated IT staff there, then you have some tough choices to make.
Well, and that's the age old, right? Do we do best of breed, where I can get the best of this and the best of this and the best of this, or do I go all in one, and I sacrifice a little bit of quality, but I get better integration, better management, better whatever? What's your take on it? Like, where would you fall today on that? Because I watched that pendulum swing.
I would. I'd like to evaluate some of the new UTM stuff if they do what they're claiming in their marketing. I think it's a viable option for enterprises, small enterprises, to handle that remote office problem and potentially actually have one device that provides them with, good security all around. I mean, this one's got Wi-Fi. I mean, you're doing everything. This one's got
PoE. It's got power over Ethernet.
Yeah, and I'm assuming a firewall, some kind of network intrusion prevention usually is included with that.
That's fascinating. It's amazing what we call a firewall today versus what we looked at 20 years ago as a firewall.
totally different.
Everything a firewall can do today is amazing. Absolutely amazing.
But I think really this is a play on their gaining more market share, because they want to say, look, if you're a home or a small home office, you can come by us. Hey, if you're a small business, hey, you can come by us. Hey, if you're a small enterprise or a large enterprise, hey, you can come by us too. Like, I don't know if this is necessarily the best strategies we talk about on startup. They want to be able to sell to everyone to expand their market.
So, yeah.
But it's interesting that they found these niches in all these different areas, and they might be able to pull it off.
What's interesting about that is if you look at what we would classify as an enterprise in a lot of cases, it's really a bunch of small offices.
Mm-hmm.
They might be onto something to say,
Right.
Because if you look at banks are notorious for this. They've got a central administration. They've got a small staff. They're trying to get everything done. But how do you make a community bank work? You've got to be in the community. You've got to have branches on every corner. And not every corner. I mean, so in South Carolina, there are a bunch of regional and community banks. They might only have 10 or 12 branches. Okay, but that's not small. Like if you look at total deposits, they might still be at $1 billion in deposits. So they're not, I mean, they're classified as a smaller regional bank, but they're not insubstantial in terms of their security needs, but they've got 12 different locations. Well, they don't have 12 security people. This might be an interesting angle.
The biggest if is if it works. And think about if you take a Linux system and you're like, well, I want it to have a firewall.
Right.
I want to have an intrusion detection system on it. I want to have a Wi-Fi router on it. I want it to do some log analysis and give reporting and then have a web interface. And when you get all those components together in the same system, from what I've heard from people closer to the UTM market, is there's a lot of issues with it. And the user base sometimes is not as advanced. Maybe they have better luck on the enterprise where your user base has a more IT focus and a more experienced IT people. When you go into the small home or small office or small business, not as much experience, you're going to get more problems. That could be another shift into the smaller enterprise. But typically these devices are, like I said, trying to do multiple things and none of them all that well, or not integrating them well together just because of issues.
This is the other angle I always look at that I think is important if you're an enterprise. So if you're listening to us and you're an enterprise, big budget, and you've got stuff, the number of third parties that we work with now is skyrocketing.
Mm-hmm.
So based on this, and again, I appreciate we haven't tested WatchGuard in particular, but if we look at any of these types of folks, do you think then that sometimes something is better than nothing? Or should we as an enterprise be helping some of our third-party providers make better decisions? And what would that look like?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah, like
I think that's our opportunity. By the way, I mean, I think I've written about this before too. But I think one of our opportunities is if because this is Enterprise Security Weekly. So if you're in a large enterprise and you're looking at it, most of the enterprises that I've dealt with in the last couple of years, they've gone from we've got a handful of providers, like literally can count them on their hand, and now it's I don't know, I've got 100, I've got 200. So now we're worrying about things like, well, how are we assessing third party? I think there's a real opportunity from the enterprise security space to lift up the community to say, okay, we've evaluated, we've looked at. If you want to be a partner with us, we like these providers. We like these things. Here's why. Because I think you've raised an interesting point. If I'm that smaller enterprise, my expertise on this might not be fantastic. My interest in it is high, and I think that's important. I don't think that you're going to find a lot of companies today that say, "Oh, I don't care about security. It doesn't matter to me." They care. Who do they trust? Who are they going to go to? But if they're engaging with you, if they want to do business with you, you can either force that iron hand on them and say, "You'll do this, this, and this," or you can say, "Hey, our team, we're going to assess it, but we're going to take a more consultative approach with you. And as a result, we like X, Y, and Z." So I'll tell you what, if you're one of those companies that's analyzed any of these devices, I'd love to hear from you. I think any of us would love to hear from you because that's how I think collectively we can do a little bit better at helping those that tier below us that we're relying on to do those services for us. I think we can help them get a little bit better with it.
what I find interesting is I think that, and listeners, if this has changed, please let me know. But when I was evaluating vendors, not just in this space, but as a network engineer, and from a networking side, a large enterprise network, you had a tendency to say, well, it would be nice if we could go to a large vendor such as Cisco,
Right.
and use as many of their products as we can, because we know Cisco. We use them for routers and switchers. Most organizations do, right? So we have foundational knowledge. Their other products, even through acquisition, we're still dealing with one vendor. Their platforms might be slightly different, but they're going to do better integrations. There's a lot of reasons why you would say, you know what, I feel comfortable with Cisco. If I have some other need for something else, I'll just expand my Cisco portfolio, dealing with the same company. It's all good. Maybe I can even negotiate a discount because I'm using all this. But what you find is there's a threshold where the pain point of using one of those additional solutions is so high that you have to go somewhere else, and you take the hit productivity-wise and learning curve-wise to go acquire another product from another vendor, just because expanding your portfolio in the other vendor is just so painful. And that's kind of a challenge for the larger enterprise providers to say, you can't just throw your stuff together, because if customers will reach that pain point, they're going to go somewhere else. So we would use a different company for our load balancers because, while Cisco had a load balancer, right, it was just we would have had to maybe change our networking.
It was an acquisition, and they didn't figure out how to get it right. Because that's what happens.
We're a Cisco network, load balancer acquisition, and by the way, to use their load balancer, I got to completely change my architecture for something to accommodate yours. Whereas if I can go buy another provider's and it fits perfectly.
Well, and don't we find sometimes too with these larger companies, they make these acquisitions. It sounds good, it looks great on paper. But their approaches are so vastly different that they don't integrate. So it sounds good. It looks great on paper. It's one vendor. You're going to have the right management. It's all going to work out properly. And, it totally doesn't work that way. Yeah. Right? I mean, I'm not going to – I know this is a show where we name names, so I won't name names. But, like, a lot of people think that Symantec buys stuff just to kill it. No, lately I don't think so. Lately, I think Symantec is on – I think Cisco's doing really well lately. I think Symantec's doing really well lately, to be fair. I think both of them are doing exceptionally well. But, I mean, just so we're clear, Symantec's reputation for the last decade has been that's where good technology goes to die. Kind
of like CA. Except CA's kind of turned it around.
But that's the thing, though, right? So CA's turned it around. By the way, just so we're clear, CA's still a top 5. Symantec's still a top 5. Cisco's still a top 5. So we can bitch about them. But they're largely doing well. And maybe what they're doing is they're figuring out that they really need to get that integration point better. Yeah.
So people spend more, their existing customers spend more.
Well, and you and I have talked about this too, in a variety of the programs that you and I have been on, and probably off camera as well. But there's a cost of switching. I mean, so to your point, there's a cost of, okay, I got to go get somebody else. But so somebody looks at it and they say, okay, well, I've got Symantec today, but I really like this other endpoint technology. But here's the reality: Symantec, give them a year, they're going to have the same capability. They have the capitalization.
That year might be too long for some.
Well, and I think that's a good point. And so what happens then is that if you're in the enterprise situation today, how do you know when that year is too long to wait versus the cost of ripping out, replacing, putting in, the friction that's going to create? I've got to learn a whole new system. Oh, and I still have to use Symantec for these things.
It's like how many of the words I was talking about the Microsoft DDE well, I shouldn't say vulnerability. Because Microsoft hasn't recognized it as a vulnerability. Microsoft recognizes it as a feature.
It's undocumented feature.
Yes, we are calling it lovingly a bug, but in all essence, it's a vulnerability and an exploit for Office-based products and others, too, that implement Microsoft's dynamic data exchange. Basically, when two applications need to share data, researchers, I believe from SensePost, first found it and said, you can exploit this. Now, when you talk about this as an enterprise problem, enterprise is like, what do we do? There's no patch. I'm like, well, you're kind of like, patch should be the most optimal solution, but there's no patch because Microsoft isn't doing it. So the aspect that I find interesting is if you have an enterprise that's using big name antivirus, right? Traditional big name antivirus, that they're like, I don't know how they're going to help us. Like they're not posting any information about it. We don't know what their coverage is to protect attacks against this DDE issue. But you look at the more smaller, nimble endpoint protection and detection vendors, and they're all over this. Their analysts have already analyzed it. They've already built protections in their product because they're smaller, they're more nimble, and this is the focus of their research, are attacks like this. So as an enterprise, my question to you, Michael, is, and this is a hard one, what do you do?
I'll tell you what I do. I look for the startup that solved the problem but didn't think that they were going to be the next unicorn, and said, by the way, we integrate with Symantec, we integrate with Cisco, we integrate with whatever. We talked about this on the interview already.
So many startups want to replace
like they want to be the next. And I think that, and we talk about this a lot on startup, but this matters in the enterprise. If you're a security leader and you're evaluating somebody, I think the question to ask them is, where do you guys see yourselves in 5 years? And if it's, we want to be the next unicorn, we want to IPO, why?
Well,
why?
In this case of endpoint detection, response, and protection, which is all one now, right? I think historically, we know as technology nerds that putting two antivirus products on the same system
that's never worked.
Is like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters. Like, you just don't
the only
ever
time I
do
see that work is there's a couple antivirus solutions that they'll buy VirusTotal or they'll roll their own, and so they're saying we're looking at all 5, 6, whatever. And that's cool. But like putting
you never
two
want
on?
two. Yeah, well, and that's why people don't want to run a newer, nimble endpoint solution and the older, more traditional AV
so the advice
solution.
is twofold. If you're evaluating, you're in an enterprise, I might go look for somebody who solved it, but does it in a way that integrates, right? It goes back to that question of, how do you make what I have today better? So if you say, oh, screw so-and-so, we replace them. We run alongside and we enhance them. Okay, I'm interested. I'd like to learn more. I might want to bring it and test it.
That's some interesting messaging for the nearly 60 companies now that are in endpoint solutions for this particular case.
By the way, if you're one of those 60 companies,
I want to talk to you.
If you start doing that messaging, then you get on their radar as maybe we should acquire them.
Right.
And if you're in that space and you're thinking, well, I don't want to be acquired, then
that's fine.
You shouldn't be in that space.
Well, maybe not, but
it's a valid exit. You're running a company to return value and to solve a really cool problem. I think if you can do that, that's interesting.
Yeah, I guess if you're a solution alongside of it, that even as an acquisition.
Well, I mean, let's take UBA.
People still don't want to have more than one agent running on their system. That's
what's interesting.
Maybe we need to get over that as an industry.
I asked this question of a security team just this week. I said, so are we back to rip and replace? Are we back to I can only have so many things in my solution? Or are we again at, okay, what do you do? I'll add you into the network. Because if you go back to the 90s, you couldn't, right, that was when air gap technology first came out. And if you remember, they said, well, we don't really replace a firewall. We're a new level. And a lot of companies would say, well, I can't put anything else in my architecture. Thanks so much. Okay, well, then we got past that. Then we went through another phase in the mid-2000s where it was, oh, no, I can't put anything else into my architecture. I have too much. Apparently right now, from the teams I've talked to, we're kind of back at the, well, what value do you provide? Maybe I can put you into the architecture. Maybe I can add another layer into it. Okay, that's kind of interesting. But as you and I talk about, I want to know then, so did you just create another screen for me to take a look at? Did you create another hurdle, another hop? Did you, and by the way, I don't, maybe your opinion is different. If you say, well, we integrate with SIM, stop. Stop. Just stop. I love SIM. I like it. I like the concept of it. But the amount of time and effort and energy and cost it takes in order to get a good result from that is a little bit overwhelming. And so what I'm curious about then is, how do you integrate with other people? And I brought up UBA. Is that its own platform, or is that a feature set? My take, long term, that's a feature set. And so if you're in that UBA space today, and you're really good at the user analytics, and you can figure out type of stuff out, then what I'd be looking at right now is, how many systems do I feed into, and how do I make those systems better? Because in the event I'm wrong, you're going to be a hell of a platform, and good for you. It's going to be a good IPO. And when I'm right, well then cool. You've got a lot of people that would be happy to acquire you.
Right. Well, that's all the time that we have today. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.